think it kind of is. Yeah, should be fine. And I'm also seeing myself here. It's amazing. And today we're gonna talk about design, as you can see up there. While I am also doing stuff. Yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is basically also one of the reasons why I like to use my phone for streaming, because I can do something simultaneously, something that is also a bit processing heavy, because it's not always that easy, when I want to do something while I'm streaming, but then just nothing really works because my PC is just so consumed by this task and whatnot. Maybe I actually have to kind of deal with settings a little bit. Anyway, design. As you might know, I have graduated last year from design school. Design, I think it was a high school. I never ever know what it is, since it's not my system. It's always quite difficult to say, but still, I have graduated last year after 5 years of designing and whatnot, and I still do design work for clients and stuff, and also just do it in my leisure time because I like it. One of the reasons why I've decided to actually make this format, design talk or whatever it's gonna be called in the future, in which I'm gonna talk about design. And no, not gonna care about the way I look, not gonna care basically about how I'm gonna represent it or present it, I'm not gonna have probably fancy slides, just also not gonna edit it very nicely, but I'm gonna talk about design. I'm gonna pick out certain topics. I'm gonna talk about certain things that I find pretty useful, also regarding one's life quite, What I mean is something that I've realized today, that sometimes you can see a correlation between design and life. Maybe this is just something that that happens in my mind. It's not really there, but I kind of imagine it is there. But anyway, we are going to do that. Today it's probably going to be about balance. Balance in life is very important. Having quote unquote work-life balance. A term that I've actually always pretty much disliked, because I found that first of all, it was so overused, and I quite always dislike things that are overused for whatever reason. I actually do not really know, but also mindset is one of these words. It's just everyone uses it, and everyone kind of dismantles it, and everyone is just I don't know. I just really dislike that. But balance in life. Balance in life being very important, but also in design, having a good balance between chaos and structure, having a good balance of black and white / color and neutral colors, or bright colors and neutral colors, a white space and not white space or negative space, and just trying to make things feel right. Very often I do see in design that some things just work because I feel like they work. I cannot really tell, and I'm just not always dissecting design, not always when I'm just seeing something like this thing here. I'm not always just having a look at it and I'm like, well, okay, this looks good because of this angle. No, not gonna do that, not gonna say that. Sometimes I do, but I'm never ever kind of loading it into fucking Photoshop and kind of draw lines and see how the grid is working or how proportions are working and whatnot. But yeah, of course, proportions, having a balance of proportions or sizes, so to speak, which in the end can be translated to white space and also gray values and whatnot. But balance in design is actually an article, balance in design. Quite often when you're Googling for things, you also can see in Google Pictures some, how should I say, some schematic, exactly what I thought of. If you Google balance in design, you're just going to see certain examples for what balance in design really is. Somebody's talking about symmetrical design there, but also asymmetrical design. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is about balance. And of course, balance is just one of those principles, one of those factors, one of those reasons why design can be good, but also can be bad, of course, when balance is off. But obviously, when you're thinking about balance, probably contrast is also gonna play a bit of a role then. If you think about black and white, if you just try to balance black with white, then, well, of course, you're kind of creating contrast by doing so. And also there's other things and other reasons why a design can be good, other factors. For example, rhythm, then there is, harmony, and then relations or relationships and so on and so forth. But balance in general, I think, can very well be used, as I'm just thinking about it, can very well be used for making sure that you're not overdoing things. If you can see, well, okay, there are just a multitude of different things going on. There's a lot of exciting stuff. For example, a lot of lines, a lot of different line widths or strengths and whatnot. And you see that and you think like, well, for some reason, I do not really like this design. I do not really like this work that I just did. So maybe it is because of this misbalance between having just this chaos, this variety of different elements, and the opposite of it, which in the end means reduce the amount of chaos that you have, reduce the amount of very exciting structures that you have, to balance it out again, and have a balance. Here, on the other hand, something that I today have realized, you should really know about your strengths and know those things that you're good at. For me, it really is chaos, always in my life. I do live in chaos. I have a lot of chaos, and I can deal with chaos quite well, unless it is overwhelming me. But this is a different thing, a different topic for a different day. But still, let me just quickly check that. Still, you can use this thing. You can use your strength for your maybe your weakness as a strength. My weakness of always having to have chaos in design, but using it as something positive, using it as something good, and then just letting this be how I design things, period. Just using chaos. And I have seen that when I'm doing so, the designs actually get pretty good, and I enjoy them, and I really like them. Whereas when I'm trying to really be structured and just have very simplistic things maybe as well, which does often really not work for me for whatever reason. It's just, maybe it's just also something that I dislike to see. Maybe it does work, but I just, do not want to see it. Could also be the case. But using your strengths is also a good one. Maybe you have a strength in typography, then use a lot of typography, and use good typography, and use this, and just have it, basically creating a balance of things that you're good at. Well, maybe actually a disbalance of things that you're good at and things that you pretty suck at, Some things you're good at, okay, you're just gonna do a lot of it. And all the other things that you're not good at, well, try to see it as a factor, meaning when I'm designing something, of course, I cannot just make it completely chaotic. So maybe I'm gonna use a grid, so that in this chaos there still is a system. Because I know, okay, when it is too much chaos, it is probably also going to be pretty bad. This imbalance, once again, this imbalance of chaos and non-chaos, it just has to be somehow right. And I would actually say that most people know when something is right and then something isn't. When it comes to design, when it comes to art, when it comes to quite everything, also just emotional things and human-to-human interactions and stuff like that, I would really argue that people just know and notice when something is off. And so if you feel like, well, the design that you made is not as good as it could be, or just is not good, well, what is it due to? Is it due to lack of balance? Do I have too much of this and too less of that? Have I maybe am I having too much balance? Is it too symmetrical? As I just realized, it is indeed about balance as well. Is it too symmetrical? Should I use a bit of asymmetry to do it then? And then trying it out and then seeing, well, it's actually even more shit, and then going back again. No, I don't know. I don't know this, I really don't know. Unfortunately, I really do know. I do know what it is like to just not really knowing why something is not working. But I've actually seen using a grid very often solves problems. Just from the beginning on, trying to use a grid. A grid to use as a way to reduce the amounts of options that you have. I do not like decision making. Once again, a thing that I've kind of seen in design as well, a characteristic of my personality seen in design, actually very interesting. Me not really liking to make decisions, and having to make a ton of decisions if I'm in front of a blank plate or blank slide, blank piece of paper, blank document in the end. And so what I thought about, well, why don't I just use a grid? Doesn't necessarily have to be something too amazing. In Photoshop, this is where I do most of my work nowadays. Even to some degree, it doesn't make too much sense, but anyway, it is just a lot of cover design. It's a lot of things that are not gonna get printed most often, which, by the way, is always quite nice to know if in the end it gets printed. So I most often make sure that I'm using the best quality I can work with. So if the client decides to fucking print this shit, this is also gonna work. So yes, reduce the amount of decisions you can make and have to make. It's gonna make your life easier, okay? When it doesn't look good in place AC, I'm gonna use place AB and see what it looks like there. If it doesn't work again, well, I'm gonna use a different place of those 10 that I'm having available. Instead of having a blank document in front of you and using this as a way to deal with. Of course, you have corners, you have the middle, you have axes and whatnot. But I would also argue that, by having a grid, you are gonna get away from the corners. And this is insofar, I think, a good idea because most often we see things in the corners. And we have seen it often enough that it kind of gets boring, So let's just use a grid, might also be a diagonal grid. As I said in Photoshop, have I said it? I don't actually know. In Photoshop, I just use show grids, and then I'm having a grid there, which is not well aligned with the document itself, but I'm just going to deal with it. It is what it is. It is good enough and well enough done that I can use it, and then I can use it to actually help myself. You could also make your own grid and have a look at a pretty great book about grid systems by, let me actually check that. Grid systems design. Grid systems in graphic design by Josef Müller-Bockmann. This person actually being pretty much known as a Swiss graphic designer and a pioneer of international typographic style. Is there actually work? Yes, there is work. Beautiful. Really, really beautiful. But I'm just having a poster in front of me. The Junifestwochen Zürich, or July Festival Week Zurich, I think it is called in English. I do not even know. Which is a poster from 1957. Remember, this is a poster from 1957. A lot of people have used it as inspiration. It's still a great style. I think you can still use it to some degree, but we have seen it already. It is already done. This style was already there. It is not modern anymore. So using it again, basically replicating it, is a good idea if you just want to make something that's, well, boring, I guess. Something that works. Yes, we know that, and we know that it works, but it is nothing new, and it is for sure nothing quite modern, unless there's some kind of renaissance going on of things like these just becoming modern again for whatever reason. Do not get me wrong. I like this style. I like this Bauhaus type style. I think it is great. I think it is cool, very clear and clean, and this is probably one of the reasons why I just can't deal with it, or can't replicate it without actually having a side-by-side comparison thing going on. On one hand I have my document, on the other hand I'm just having one of his posters, and then I'm just basically replicating it one by one to understand how it works. Most often it is indeed about grid systems. Obviously one of the reasons why he wrote such a book. The book is quite great. You can find it on the web, I guess. I don't know if I should recommend that, because I don't know if it is legally on the web, but it is a book from 1981, so it might also be in the archive, the Internet Archive, which is always a great place to look up and figure out whether you can find one of those books that you really want to check out. So what have we been talking so far today? Balance in life and balance in design being fundamental. Therefore also contrast, but I think that I'm gonna make an episode about contrast itself as well, because I think it's useful. I think it is quite important. Balance, what is there as well in terms of balance in my mind? Sometimes we can't see balance. One of the reasons why from time to time it is a good idea to, for example, use a black and white filter over your colored poster or whatever it may be, to just have a look at the gray values and see whether this is balanced out, because sometimes we tend to get overwhelmed, or our vision system tends to get overwhelmed, and this leads us to not seeing things as we should see them, or as we could see them, let's actually put it like that, which in the end prevents you from maybe making pretty important and detrimental decisions for this piece and this work that you just working on. Maybe, and I guess this is going to be my new scheme, and I'm actually seeing that it's actually been a pretty good idea to start this series, I guess. In life we do often, which now this is the philosophy part of the whole thing. In life we also tend to not see things just because we're so overwhelmed by them. As there is even a saying, I don't know if, I just know it in German, might also be an English one, I never ever know. Sometimes they do overlap a bit, but very often they don't. But not being able to see the tree because of the forest. Having this overwhelming amount of trees represented in the forest, but not being able to see the singular one, which, I don't know, we could interpret that right now, but I'm not going to do so. I think that you're smart enough to know what it could mean and whatnot. What is this actually about? Oh, Stoicism and stress. Stoicism and stress, and now export that shit. I just thought about I could use the camera as well to show you some things. I'm actually going to show you let me do this. I don't know how well this works, but at least you can see something. So this is the book that I was referring to. Maybe in images we can see a bigger one. There it is. Grid system / Rastersysteme, which is one English and one German, and also in the book, if I may be able to find it, you have not really like this, but somewhat like that. I don't really think that this is the book, but one half of it, or one thing of it, is going to be in German, and the other one is going to be in English. So it is just translated in the book itself, which, well, I think it is a cool idea, good idea, useful, but I don't know. It would have made him actually, I think, a bit more money if he had 2 books. Anyway, I guess it wasn't really about money for him. In this case, at least, maybe it was before, but whatever. What are they called, actually? Principles of design, I guess. It's, by the way, also useful for me to rehearse them. I have never ever memorized them. For me, it is more or less like, okay, just give me the words. I'm gonna see them, probably gonna forget a lot of them, but then when I'm working, I do just realize, okay, this is why things work, because I'm using repetition, because I'm using a pattern, because I'm using balance, because I'm using rhythm, because I'm just using relationships, which is, I think, not the way you call them, and so on and so forth. But balance, as well as I'm just seeing it, is actually one of those principles, but I would argue that it is a meta principle as well, because if the balance of scales does not work, which might be called proportions, but I'm gonna call it balance of scales, because I don't care. Nothing is gonna work, if you do not have great proportions. It is one of the biggest deal breakers for any designers I've seen throughout the years and throughout many projects and many designs. Well over 5,000, to be honest, if you count all of these, all of these Instagram posts and whatnot. But in the end, balance is very important. As I said, also in life, working hard and relaxing hard. But, sometimes balance may not necessarily come in the opposite of something, Balance may also be doing a lot of this, but also doing a lot of the other thing, which then contrasts themselves, you know what I mean? For example, I could say, okay, I'm gonna work a lot on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm also gonna read a lot, which is not like I'm gonna work less, just gonna also reduce the work. In the end, this is what's basically happening, because I'm replacing something, as we replace habits. I'm replacing this work with something else, but still it is quite a lot. But sometimes we do have to think about, like, okay, does it make sense to not use this element, or is this actually detrimental for my design, for example, but also for my life? Is this something that I just want to have or need? Sometimes we need things as work itself. A lot of people do not really want to work, but they just need to have it. And so structuring things around it, maybe have a circle as a main element, and using this main element as an origin for all the other elements, which does indeed create some sort of a balance, not having multiple origins and having everything just scattered around and whatnot, but having a clear, like, line in there, having a clear also view direction the viewer should be having when viewing this design. For example, there is also something called design thinking. And design thinking. When I just think about the fact, whether this is basically what I'm just doing right now, using it design as part of life and translating it into another part of life, which I think does work for things. But yeah, design thinking, there it is. And I'm actually also gonna show you Stanford School design thinking process. Okay, let's have a look at this. Research guide. I'm going to show you as well, obviously. It's actually a bit of a... But you can see it very nicely. There we go. Emphasize. Interviewers shadowing seek to understand non-judgmental. Emphasize. That, so you have first of all emphasize, then define, then ideate, which is share ideas, all ideas worthy, diverge, converge, then prototype, and then test. So in the end, what I'm seeing there is, first of all, you try to understand what you're seeking. Then you're defining like just some guidelines for what you're seeking or for what you're willing to make. Then based on those guidelines, you're just gonna have ideas. I do think that sometimes you're gonna just see the group and have ideas immediately, which you can then redefine by just this defined process. Then you have a prototype, you're making something, and then you test it. Just seeing how, I think in design it is pretty obvious, okay? You think about your target group, you're defining your target group, you define what you want to have out of this project, then you create ideas, or you have some ideas, you create a prototype design, so the first version of it, one of 10 versions, depends on the client. And then you're going to test it and see whether it works or not. Even if testing in design per se, I think, is graphic design. Automotive design, yes, testing is a thing. If it's not working, it is not working. In graphic design, it's like, okay, maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. And it is very subjective, If I think that a logo is not good, then it is not good. It doesn't work, period. Of course, there are also some technical issues you might be having, some technical importances regarding design. Of course, if you're printing something, it might be pretty great to use CMYK instead of RGB, and then so on and so forth. I mean, we all know that stuff, but which I think is actually a pretty great problem of graphic design. Probably part of the reason why a ton of people that graduated with me do not have anything to do with design anymore. Even if it is very useful as I think a basis in life, just knowing basics of design and aesthetics, it's always going to be great, Clothing yourself, having a nice home. All of these things that I do not have and do not do, by the way. Great examples. No, but to end this episode here, balance in life. Have balance in life and have balance in your design, but balance regarding quite everything. And so think about where balance might be. Useful or applicable, because sometimes we just tend to forget about things, But yeah, that being said, see you in the next episode of Design Talk tomorrow, probably, maybe even later in the day. I don't fucking know. Bye bye. Or not.